Groupthink in science. Why scientists in any given field are prone to groupthink. A case study in paleontology. Groupthink, a psychological phenomenon where members of a group prioritize consensus and conformity over critical evaluation, is not limited to political or social contexts. It can also emerge within scientific communities, where prevailing paradigms dominate the interpretation of evidence, sometimes at the expense of alternative hypotheses or conflicting data. This article explores the concept of groupthink in the scientific field, with a particular focus on paleontology. In this discipline, the fossil record presents substantial evidence of saltations, sudden jumps, or discontinuities in the formation of higher taxa. However, the majority of paleontologists remain committed to the Darwinian paradigm of gradualism, even though it often appears to be the exception rather than the rule. This commitment persists despite the absence of a sufficient causal mechanism to explain these abrupt appearances of new species, leaving intelligent design, ID, as a better explanation that is frequently dismissed by evolution believers due to groupthink. The fossil record, evidence of saltations. The fossil record, long regarded as one of the most valuable resources for understanding the history of life on Earth, tells a story that challenges the expectations of gradual evolutionary change. According to Darwinian theory, species evolve slowly over long periods through a process of incremental changes driven by natural selection. This process of gradualism predicts a fossil record filled with transitional forms, showing step-by-step evolution from one species to another. However, the actual fossil record often shows something different: saltations. These saltations refer to the sudden appearance of new species or higher taxa, large groups such as families, orders, classes, phyla, without the expected transitional forms. For instance, the Cambrian explosion, a period around 540 million years ago when most of the major animal groups first appeared, provides a striking example of such discontinuities. The higher taxa appear suddenly in the fossil record, with no clear ancestral lineage. From an empirical standpoint, saltations are much more common in the fossil record than the gradual changes predicted by Darwinian evolution. Yet, despite this evidence, the majority of paleontologists remain focused on the rare cases where gradual change appears to occur. This persistence reflects not only the deep entrenchment of Darwinian theory within the scientific community, but also a form of groupthink that discourages authentic consideration of alternative paradigms such as intelligent design. The Darwinian paradigm and groupthink in paleontology. The adherence to gradualism in paleontology, despite the prevalence of saltations, is a striking example of how groupthink can shape scientific inquiry. The Darwinian paradigm, which emphasizes slow and continuous evolutionary change, has become so ingrained in the scientific community that challenging it is commonly perceived as heretical or unscientific. This dynamic fosters an environment where scientists are more likely to interpret data in ways that conform to the prevailing paradigm, even if that data suggests a different story. In paleontology, the focus on rare cases of gradualism can be explained by the fact that the Darwinian paradigm requires it. Darwin himself was aware of the gaps in the fossil record, acknowledging that the lack of transitional forms was a problem for his theory. He suggested that these gaps were due to the incompleteness of the fossil record. Over time, many paleontologists have continued to hold to this explanation, seeking out the elusive transitional forms rather than grappling with the more pervasive evidence of saltations. This reluctance to engage with evidence of saltations can be seen as a form of groupthink, where the majority of scientists conform to the dominant view rather than exploring alternative explanations. In this case, the dominant view is Darwinian gradualism, and any evidence that contradicts it is either ignored or downplayed or explained away. This phenomenon occurs because scientific communities, like any group, are subject to social dynamics. Scientists who challenge the prevailing paradigm risk professional ostracism, loss of funding, or being labeled as fringe or unscientific. As a result, many choose to align themselves with the dominant perspective, even when the evidence does not support it. The lack of a mechanism for saltations. One of the most significant challenges for paleontologists who adhere to the Darwinian model is the lack of a sufficient causal materialistic mechanism to explain saltations. Darwinian theory relies on natural selection acting on small random mutations over time. While this mechanism works well for explaining microevolution, small changes within a species, it cannot account for the sudden appearance of entirely new groups of organisms. The formation of higher taxa, such as phyla and classes, requires more than just small, gradual changes. It involves the emergence of entirely new body plans, physiological systems, and developmental processes. Yet, there is no mechanism within the Darwinian framework that can account for these rapid and radical changes. Without a sufficient mechanism, the fossil record's saltations remain as a falsifier, or defeater, for traditional evolutionary theory. Intelligent design as a better alternative explanation. While the Darwinian paradigm is not able to explain saltations, proponents of intelligent design, ID, show that these sudden appearances of new higher taxa, orders, classes, phyla, are best explained by the action of an intelligent cause. All of the empirical evidence shows that the complexity and specificity required to produce new higher taxa are not the result of blind, unguided processes, but rather the product of a purposeful designer. From the perspective of ID, the fossil record's saltations make sense. Rather than gradual evolution, life has progressed through a series of intentional acts of design, with new orders and higher taxa appearing at specific points in Earth's history. This view provides a causal explanation for the sudden jumps in the fossil record that Darwinian theory cannot provide. Despite its explanatory power, ID is often dismissed by the evolutionary community as unscientific, primarily because it challenges the materialistic assumptions that underlie Darwinian theory. This dismissal is another manifestation of groupthink, where the majority of scientists refuse to entertain alternative explanations simply because they fall outside their accepted paradigm. Conclusion: the tendency toward groupthink within scientific communities can stifle the exploration of better alternative hypotheses, even when the evidence does not support the dominant paradigm. In paleontology, the fossil record presents substantial evidence of saltations, sudden appearances of new higher taxa, yet the majority of paleontologists continue to focus on the rare instances of gradual change. This adherence to gradualism, despite its inadequacies, is a result of the deep entrenchment of Darwinian theory within the scientific community. As long as groupthink persists, better alternative explanations such as intelligent design will remain marginalized, even though they provide a more causally adequate explanation for the patterns observed in the fossil record. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment below if you agree or would like to add your thoughts.